We're a national grassroots organization that has an international membership that works to abolish the prison industrial complex and create safe and healthy solutions that don't rely on punishment or caging as responses to social, economic, or political problems. And one of the ways in which we do that is by fighting prison construction. I'm based out of California. California has the largest prison system in the US of any state. And so it's a really important site in which to struggle. And one of the places we've done that is to try and make sure that particular prisons don't get built. Most of the prisons in California are in the Central Valley on what was former farmland and has now been turned into prisons. And a lot of the imprisoned people come from Southern California, so there's a real sort of geographic element to all of our organizing. So one of the things we've done is work in coalition with a lot of different groups. We work with a coalition called Californians United for a Responsible Budget that works to reduce prison spending through decarceration and get that money to go back into communities and life-affirming structures, into education, housing, healthcare, food, as well as other things that are life-affirming, such as libraries. And so in some of our particular citing struggles, we undertook a big campaign around this prison called Delano II back in the mid to early 2000s to basically work to stop that from being built. Because one thing that we were seeing was if you build a prison, it would get filled. You know, as we've seen, you know, with the extreme sort of rise in just all sorts of legislation, and you know, as increasing federal money goes into local policing in a post-1968 era, but also even more post-1986 with regard to, you know, drug war infrastructures. We've seen how easy it is, you know, for folks to get caught up in the system and take plea bargains, and you know, there's 101 ways to get locked up, and you know, most of the people targeted are poor people, people of color, black folks specifically, but also transgender folks. And so, you know, we've seen how if there's capacity in the prisons, they're going to get filled. And with California, another big issue is the parole and probation policies. So a lot of people are automatically sent back inside on parole, on technical violations of parole, which basically creates a recidivism rate that is a legislative mandate. And so if there's capacity, there's going to be folks there. So we've really tried to push back to make sure that prisons can't be built in particular regions. And in order to do that, we've had to, you know, reach out to our neighbors in the Central Valley. So we worked a lot with especially environmental justice groups. So one of the ways we were actually able to stall the construction of the prison in the Delano II campaign was we figured out that, you know, the site they wanted to build it on was the home of the Tipton kangaroo rat, which is an endangered species. So we worked alongside what might have been an unlikely alliance in order to make sure this prison, which is, you know, in addition to destroying human lives of all sorts, extremely horrible for the environment. So it soaks up a ton of water. It's like having a small city on the edge of your town in terms of water, in terms of energy costs. So those are some of the sort of tactics we've utilized in order to slow down and halt prison construction. So I got involved in prison activism because I grew up in Tucson, Arizona, which is, you know, a pretty intense site of militarism and policing and surveillance. And I saw most of my friends who I grew up with end up either, you know, getting locked in cages themselves, or going and working in sectors that lock people in cages, or going to fight in war, or, you know, the other, you know, well-paying job in my community was working for Raytheon Corporation, building weapons to go kill people. And so, you know, I saw sort of all sectors of my community completely infiltrated with a type of military Keynesian capitalist structure. And, you know, it was very hard to live in a space that wasn't controlled by warfare. I was lucky enough to where I went to college and I was able to sort of clarify how, you know, the phenomena that I was seeing amongst my peers growing up when I turned 18 and when they turned 18, that, you know, this was not just isolated to Tucson, that this was a much larger system. And so, you know, while it was the personal sort of things of seeing my people locked up that, you know, brought me into the movement. It was the vision of radical transformation of our society, of liberation, of anti-racism, of anti-capitalism, of anti-heteropatriarchy, of anti-transphobia. Those are the sort of vibrant things, and alongside all those antis is envisioning a new society where we actually deal with harm collectively, where we actually say violence is a bad thing, and we can address it right here, and we have for thousands of years, and we don't need the state or any other, you know, bureaucratic agency that's outside of our community control to deal with our own harms. And we can actually determine what we call harm, which is obviously a very different thing than crime. So one thing that we do in Critical Resistance is, you know, we try and build with our folks inside, and we have a membership that's inside. And, you know, one way in which we communicate and do political dialogues is both through letter writing and phone calls. Our office has, you know, we accept all collect calls and, you know, converse with our folks, in addition to the fact that many of us in our movement are formerly imprisoned people who have tons of contacts with their folks inside. We have, you know, parents of folks who are inside, kids of folks who are inside, all sorts of relationships. Infrastructurally, one of the main things is our print media work. So we see Critical Resistance Oakland has a newspaper project called The Abolitionist. That's a collaborative endeavor between imprisoned people and folks on the outside. And, you know, I should note that all of this is towards the goal of collapsing and disarticulating that distinction between outside and inside to, you know, for a type of collective liberatory project.